What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. My name is Adam. I will be the host here on Hobby Hotline. I'm so used to saying the Hobby News Daily intro. I always have to trick myself into to make sure I'm saying the right intro here. Today, I am joined by Brody the Kid, and then we also have an imposter, it seems. We have the imposter Rich Klein. Actually, it's Victor. He will be Rich Klein will be jumping in a little bit later. Victor is currently at the Dallas Card Show. I'll start with you, Victor. What's you're down at the Dallas Card Show. How are things going down there so far?
It's doing pretty good, Adam. And I don't know. There's like a caterpillar or something on your upper lip. I don't know what's going on there. It looks good. I like it. No, yeah, I came down to the Dallas Card Show. Not sports cards is not the primary reason why I'm here. It's kind of like secondary, but I was able to come and visit Uncle Rich Klein here at the office, and he's kind of showing me around Allen, Texas here, just absolutely beautiful down here, and just having a good time. I got an early flight, and I want to make the show, so I'm gonna hang out for a few minutes with you guys, and then I'm gonna dip out, and we're gonna call relief to the bullpen, and I'm gonna head over to the show. And Uncle Rich has allowed me to sit in his office and kind of, but wait, I gotta do it right. I gotta get the there we go. I'm kidding, but good morning, everybody, and good morning to the chat as well.
Thank you very much, Victor. And Brody, how are you doing this wonderful Saturday morning?
I'm doing good. Good morning, everybody. Illinois got an exhibition win against number 1 team, preseason ranked Kansas. Charity game, pretty awesome. Love to see it.
Love that. And we had a White Sox. Tom had a good one here. Where is Danny? Shout out to Danny because he covered for me. I did a day trip to the NLCS a couple weekends ago, and I was supposed to be the host. And I asked Danny, I was like, "Hey, Danny, I'm maybe going to NLCS from Boston. Do you think you can cover for me?" He did. So shout out to Danny. I know he was. I think he hosted a couple weeks in a row. So I always want to give a shout out to Danny. We got couple more people just want to say hello to everybody. Yeah, right, exactly. And he loves hosting, so I'm sure for him he was like, oh no, I have to be the host again. Dang it, like he loves it. So we'll start out the show here, just kind of recapping the World Series a little bit. Unfortunately, like I said, Diamondbacks, they didn't perform as well as they did in the NLCS, so the Rangers win their first World Series, which they had a couple heartbreaking series back in the early, probably 2010s, where they almost won. They didn't. So, Brody, I'll start with you. What are you excited for this offseason when it comes to baseball? If you got anything.
I loved how Corey Seager played in that World Series, and we had Adolis Garcia who had a big just playoffs in general. So this Rangers team is going to get a big outlook, and I think people are undervaluing them during the regular season, and now they're going to be one of the top teams going to next year. I'm excited for MLB 2024. And I like the Diamondbacks and what they have the potential to do, and I think that it's good that the Rangers won this World Series because I think the Diamondbacks have a chance to do it again. And I love, like I said, Adolis Garcia, Corey Seager, great players, and winning that World Series makes them awesome, great level tier players.
Definitely. Corey Seager joins a very short list of 2-time World Series MVPs. I think it's him and then like 2 or 3 other players, but he's the only person to do it in both leagues, which I think is pretty impressive. Uncle Rich, Victor, what do you have what are you excited for this MLB offseason?
Yeah, I'm really excited. Let's talk rookies, right? Josh Jung was absolutely impressive this entire season, and in a pressure situation like the postseason, when you look at the totality of his work in the postseason, the guy was a beast defensively and offensively. So really excited about that young man and what he's got to offer, and just really happy for the Texas Rangers, their first ever. You talk about a team that's been in the league for over 50 years, has never won it. And that kind of Cinderella story, I just love that kind of stuff because it's well earned, right? They paid their dues, so to speak.
Yeah,
and they won it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the one thing that I think I'm very torn on, because as a Red Sox fan, we've done this a bunch of times where they just went out. They said we lost 102 games last year, whatever the amount that they lost. Where they said this is unacceptable. We're going out. We're going to buy all the best players that are on the market, which I think is a really good thing that they were able to win the World Series, because like if they didn't and this was an experiment that didn't work, it would definitely shy people away, I think, from spending money in the MLB, which is one issue that I feel like they shouldn't have because there's no salary cap, but that they do have because owners just for whatever reason they don't want to spend the money because for them it's a business. Like that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. It's unfortunately us as sports fans, we want our teams to always do good, but the owners sometimes they look at it and they say, well, I'm a businessman. This is just one of my businesses. This is just the number on a spreadsheet for me, unfortunately. So it's good to see that the Rangers came out and they got Corey Seager. They came out, they got DeGrom, they got Scherzer. They came out and they got all these top tier stars, and they were able to develop some of their rookies too, which is really, really good. And like I said, I think it's going to be exciting to see sort of maybe what happens with Shohei Ohtani this offseason too. I think that's going to be probably the biggest story. And I think every single team is going to be writing articles about how they're coming to their team. Whether it's, Red Sox, I've heard stuff about the Red Sox. I've heard stuff about the Angels, the Yankees. It's every team you can think of. It's going to be trying to write stories, try and convince Ohtani to come to their team. We'll see if that actually happens. But, it's definitely going to be an exciting offseason. I think a lot of good stuff is going to happen. Hopefully they can kind of continue. There has been at least a decent amount of process with them making the game a little bit better, which is nice. The second topic we've got on today's show, we're going to be looking at some gem rate grading data here. Let me just make sure I have let me pull up the other link that I have here so we can take a look at that. The October data that gem rate puts out. So, month to month down a little bit, but like, I still think it's pretty crazy that we're seeing this many cards. So, Victor, I'll start with you here. When you're looking at this data, what kind of pops out to you? Like, what are your kind of initial thoughts when you're looking at this?
Yeah, initially when I looked at this, it's grading is strong, right? I mean, you see here year over year, the hobby is indicating that they really love graded cards, and that I think is going to be a continued trend. CGC really impressive this month, and especially look at it month over month, year over year. They're really coming on strong, and that's pretty impressive. And I know there's more slides to this, and I'm sure everybody can find it online. But my point that I wanted to make on it, and it's nothing new, right? This information has been out 2 or 3 days already. And you just regurgitate a lot of people's opinion, but there's some really good opinions out there on what's happening. And I credit Neo Cards and Comics. I was listening to him about this topic, and it really, I would love to challenge the grading companies that are not on here. More specifically, let's throw in Arena, let's throw in their Tag. And how about HGA? Let's see some population reports. Let's kind of see the overall picture, and kind of the point that he was making, and I kind of agree with it, is I'm kind of suspect of a grading company that doesn't show that kind of information and keeps that close-fisted. Let's be transparent, let's be open, and let's show some numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think just from it still is mind-blowing that PSA is still grading 1 million cards in a month. Like, that is, I mean, you think about it, like maybe there are so many cards, you don't know how many of them are maybe being reslabbed, but 1 million cards is not something to shake your stick at. I'll kick it over to you, Brody. What are your kind of initial thoughts when you're looking at this type of data?
I'm still surprised that SGC's down at number 3, to be honest. I mean, they're up 12% month over month and 59 on the year, but I'm surprised that they're number 3. I think that when they went down on their prices, I thought they'd be number 2 easily, and I thought they'd be contending, but I'm surprised that they're down number 3. And I wanted to mention, too, because you mentioned Ohtani, real quick, I just wanted to mention, I'd love to hear our stories on what Mike Trout's going to do on the offseason. He needs to bounce back and show his Mike Trout self, or else his cards are going to start falling and falling and falling.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, and he's always been one of the sort of steady players in the hobby. That's like, if you're looking to buy a player that is kind of, at least, we have seen significant drops in pricing of across the board, not even just really specifically with any player. But like, he was always one of the players that was like, yeah, he's a surefire good. If you're trying to bet on a player, you can probably bet on Trout.
Yeah.
Now, I think with Trout too, I'll get back into this data in a second. I think with Trout, the problem with some players within the hobby, I think what ends up happening is that the championships and MVPs get like baked into their pricing. And it's something that's, I think, different than most other industries. Like the championships, like I said, championships and MVPs, I feel like we're sort of baked into Mike Trout's pricing. Like that's why, he was so, like, if you look at baseball and pricing, he was probably number one for quite some time in terms of like overall value of a baseball player, at least one that's in the league right now. Players that are outside the league, probably a little bit different, at least retired. But like he was him, maybe you could say, because like the thing is, like, I think Mookie Betts, for example, is what people thought Mike Trout would be. Like multiple championships, multiple MVPs. I mean, Mike Trout is a generational type of player, but it's almost, it's almost similar to like with PSA and SGC and Beckett, and this may be a little bit of a stretch of a comparison, but like Mookie Betts could be, I don't know. This comparison may not work, I think, but I'm going to try it a little bit. Mike Trout is PSA. Mookie Betts is SGC, where maybe that's not the comparison. Maybe Mike Trout's Beckett or something. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not sure if this is going to work or not. But the gap has been significantly closed between the two players and kind of the comparison between the two companies. That's sort of the comparison I'm trying to make here. The gap between SGC and PSA has significantly closed, where I think the gap between Mookie Betts and Mike Trout in terms of best player in the league has definitely closed. And I think you could definitely make the argument that Mookie Betts is the best player in the league. The Red Sox did trade him for nothing, basically. So that's something that I will have to live down for the rest of my life. If they never win another World Series, it's going to be the Mookie Betts curse, basically. That's kind of how I've deemed it at this point, because Red Sox ownership are a perfect example of a team that sort of has 1 foot in and 1 foot out, where they want to be this good team, but also at the same time the owners are like, well, it's a business, so that's whatever. Like I said, I'll move on here because I could go on for days about Mookie Betts.
Hey, Adam, a couple of things here too. I want to make mention on this gem rate thing. I found the actual graded cards for sports cards now, because when we look at those, that's a totality of everything.
Right.
But when you look at sports cards only,
that's the data I pulled up here.
Yeah. You see some pretty interesting things here. It basically, PSA, their sports cards is at 644,000 of the 1.2 million. 644,000 were actual sports cards, which is down 10% year over year. So that's pretty interesting. So what's that telling us? I guess
here was the.
Yeah,
I think
there you go.
This was the sports card slide. Yeah, with sports and miscellaneous, I'm sure it's probably like wrestling or F1 or probably something along those lines. But yeah,
year over year, it seems like are we getting smarter? Are we not sending in anything and everything? Are we? And I think that's the trend that we're seeing here with that down 10%. Mm-hmm. I think the hobby's getting a little bit more wiser with what they're actually sending in. So that's what that is telling me. Somebody else might have a different opinion. So yeah, that was the last point I wanted to make on this gem rate thing, which I found pretty interesting. And on the Mike Trout thing, I made mention here recently, but I've seen a significant drop in his play, especially once he got married. When he got married and started having children, I noticed his play started to get a decline. I might be just assuming, right? But I think his interests are divided now, and I think honorably so, because I think when you're starting a family, raising a family, right, your interest may not be fully on baseball anymore. And I can just imagine having 100 things to do. You're going 100 miles an hour in 100 different directions,
right?
But your heart wants to be with your family, and I think it's an issue of the heart with Mike Trout. And I'm just waiting for that moment, like the old Rocky movies, right? Where Rocky was training for a fight and he just couldn't really get it together.
Right.
It wasn't until his wife, Adrian, came in, right? And kind of like gave him that speech and just really encouraged Rocky to just go for it, right? And that just infused this energy into Rocky, where he now started training, and we would get those scenes of him training, and then he would actually win the fight.
Andy's from Philadelphia, so like that.
Andy's from Philadelphia, right? So likewise, I'm just waiting for that moment that maybe, Mike Trout's wife might just speak some life into him and really encourage him, because I do think he's entering the second half of his season. He's starting to find himself and maybe even his manhood now, right? And so I think there's a lot of turmoil maybe going on within him, but I think he still has a couple good seasons left in him. So I'm not writing him off just yet. I'm actually looking to pick up some Mike Trout, because I do think with the body of work that he's already done, he's at least a respectable candidate for Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and I think too, like he did sign also that massive contract too. So it's like, I do wonder, he is a human being just like all of us. Like, even though he is a super athlete, like he, to get a contract where, over the next 13 years or whatever it was, that you're going to get like $500 million, that I'm just thinking of myself, like, if I were to, which granted, I don't know how I could even really compare that, but like, if he's getting all of this money, he looks at it, and I hope that he wouldn't look at it like this, but I think that some players do. You look at like a Chandler Parsons, for example, and I'm not, I guess, comparing Chandler Parsons to Mike Trout, but Chandler Parsons got that huge contract in the NBA, and then he just went on and just was bad the rest of his career because he had a guaranteed contract for his whole career. Now, I don't think Mike Trout's going to do that, but I think that the contract could also potentially have some sort of effect on him as a player, just because I feel like it's hard for there not to be a little bit of complacency when you sign at the time the largest contract in the history of all of sports. Like that's gotta be something that probably weighs on you a little bit too. Like where if you're a competitor, you're probably looking at it and saying like what do I need to do to actually fulfill this contract? Or if you're Mike Trout, or you're the Angels or something along those lines, like I think Mike Trout, especially too, because I think someone in the comments actually here too said Mike Trout's already a Hall of Famer. So that's another thing where it's like, if he were to retire today, he would be in the Hall of Fame. Even if he has a second half of his career that's not so good, I feel like he's still sort of kind of revolutionized the game a little bit and kind of became a little bit more of a superstar.
But I don't know. If he keeps declining though, right? It's concerning to me. We look at Don Mattingly. He had 10 spectacular years and 10 years of a downward spiral. And I just look where he's at. So to say he's a lock, I think if he gives us one more epic season, I would say he's a lock. But right now,
right. Little tough. Yeah. And then just to get back to the gem rate data, I think, when you look at year over year, PSA being down 10%, and then all of these, and then even, CGC, I guess, being down 50%. I'm not 100% from a sports perspective. Like, I don't think that 52%, I don't think is as big of a deal as the, because CGC isn't really like a sports card grader, I guess. I would consider them not really like that, but, with SGC being up 46%, I think that's really good. And then even Beckett surprisingly being up 9%. That's also good. I think it's hard to really look at. It's hard to look at a number that says total graded 600,000 and be like, that's bad, because it's like month to month, it's up 7%. Yes, they're down 10% year to year, but I don't know. I just think PSA has sort of figured out maybe the pricing that they want to do. They made a lot of changes there, and I'll kick to Brody before we sort of switch over to a little bit of a different topic here. Brody, like, do you think that there is ever going to be a chance where SGC overtakes PSA? Maybe I think that's kind of an interesting question there. Do you think that could ever happen, or do you think PSA will always be number one?
They'd have to do something massive, I think. And I think they did their pricing change, and I think PSA is still grading 644,000 cards, and they're about 5 times more cards on sports side. I don't see it happening. There'd have to be some massive change or decline at PSA in a couple of years for it to happen. I don't see it happening though.
And I guess maybe so, Victor. I think you might have to jump off in a minute or two. I'll ask you the same question before maybe we switch over to the next topic. Do you think that PSA will always be number one, or do you think that like SGC? And I don't think Beckett at this point really could overtake PSA, but I think SGC, sort of has the rumblings where they could potentially, if they keep kind of maybe, I don't know what they would have to do, but do you think that there could ever be a switch of like SGC and PSA switching that top spot, or do you think it's pretty much just this list right here that we have is basically the list that we're going to have for forever, like in terms of the rankings?
I don't think so. I think PSA is king of the jungle. I think the only one that can take down PSA is PSA. And I think that's okay. And there's nothing wrong with being the second best grading company, the second most desired grading company, or the third most desired grading company. And I think I really liked the way it was prior to the boom that we just had, right? It was every grading company had their lane, and everybody was able to coexist, and everybody was able to be profitable. And I can foresee them maybe leaning back into each one kind of carving out their lane, right? And when we look at CGC, for example, they year over year they were at over 100%. Here in the sports, they're a negative 52 year over year. So they're probably carving their lane in the TCG side more than likely. And so, and that'll be, I think that'll be maybe the hobby carving that out, helping them carve that out. So we'll see what happens. But PSA is king of the jungle, man.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think SGC has cemented themselves in that top three conversation. Whether they're bigger than Beckett, I think that's really honestly up to interpretation. Like, I think that's up to whoever is, I think that they grade sort of different categories, in my opinion. Like, SGC is more like PSA than Beckett is like PSA, where SGC grades more like regular base cards, where Beckett, I mean, I feel like any RPAs nowadays you're seeing are, for the most part, they're going to be graded by Beckett, I think. I would say I'd say that's probably, and I'm gonna highlight some of the comments here. Hard to stay at the top of the game. Yeah, this is back to Trout. I think kind of similar. Go ahead, Brody.
No, I'm just saying that's true. I mean, the Angels, they've only made the playoffs one time. Always been there,
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And then SGC year over year jump is the big story. Yeah, I think so too. Like even before this year, I think that they've had this type of growth within the hobby, with people really grading a lot of cards there. And I mean, I think that there are a lot of like content creators that are sponsored by SGC. So like that, I definitely think that helps a little bit. Like, I don't see really many, like, I hate the term influencers, but like influencer type people, I just call them content creators. That's what they are. Whether you want to call them influencers or not, that's your business. They're content creators. Whether you get to determine whether they're influencing you to do something. That's not for me to determine.
I like it.
But yeah, so like, if the SGC does marketing in that way, PSA really kind of doesn't. So I think that also definitely helps with, they're having deals for grading, stuff along those lines. And I mean, yeah, it's SGC's position to lose basically at this point, in my opinion. Like they would have to really mess up pretty badly, because we've seen PSA have to shut down. Like that happened in this timeline of sports cards. Like I feel like the pandemic era, I don't know when exactly, you have like the junk wax era or whatever. I think this era is going to be known as a grading era. There's going to be some sort of grading element to whatever they consider this era, basically, because of how much we've seen grading really taking over. And kind of sort of transitioning here, a company that is not Topps or Panini, that is in the kind of zeitgeist of the world, is going to be Leaf, who just signed a pretty big, probably one of the biggest names in all of wrestling history. The Gotta go. You gotta go, Rich. I mean,
that's my call. That's my call to the bullpen.
Perfect.
All right, guys. Thanks.
Yeah.
See you.
Thanks, Victor. Also, I forgot to talk about at the beginning of the show. Brody, have you jumped into Fortnite yet? Have you jumped into the new map?
I did, man. And I'm excited to see what this has to do for Fortnite cards. It's very possible that the Fortnite card market has it could go up because of this. A lot of old players are playing again. I had a lot of fun yesterday.
Yes, I mean, I jumped in. I got my first victory royale in quite some time. I mean, I used to play a lot of Fortnite back in the day, not as much anymore, but even just going back to the old map, I landed right in Pleasant Park, right in that top left house. I hit the same chest, and I'm sure people were probably talking a different language to people that don't play video games. But at Fortnite cards, honestly, in my opinion, have always been something that I've been kind of interested in, just because like the game is so popular and it's such a iconic thing like in popular culture that like I don't know. I mean, it doesn't always translate to cards, but I do think that some of those first sets that Panini came out with are kind of interesting to buy, like with those original early game skins. I think are pretty interesting. We have Rich Klein joining in the building. Rich, before we get into the rock topic, I want to say how you doing? How you doing on this? Like I said, wonderful Saturday.
Oh, it's wonderful. I've been at the Dallas Card Show the last couple of days. Thursday night was one of the slowest I ever saw, but it was rocking yesterday. It was a really good day at the show, and even before the general admission came at 2:00, it was rocking. So anytime, and the advantage for us at the show is we can actually walk from here to the show.
Nice.
Anytime you can walk somewhere to a show, I'm a big fan of, or take the train. I have to drive to get here, but it's all of 10 minutes. So
right, yeah, exactly.
Wonderful hobby weekend. Brody, someday you need to come down. Adam, someday you need to get here.
Yeah, I agree. It's on my list of places I gotta travel to for sure. Anything from the Dallas Card Show that surprised you? I mean, I think Victor's heading in there now, so you've been there. So anything that has been surprising so far as you've kind of been at the show?
I think the most surprising thing is that, and I always say this, the hobby may be evolving, but it's not dead. It's still a very active place to buy and sell cards and trade cards. The show was crowded yesterday. I'm sure today is usually the biggest day. And so there's always interest in cards. Now, the difference is that it may not be at some of the elongated prices I was listening to your recap. I didn't get to listen to all of it. I tried always to listen to your recap each week on Saturdays when I can, and I didn't listen. But a 52 mantle that sold it's still sold for more than $1 million. Right. I still remember when cards like that were $15,000. So
exactly.
If you had bought it in 1986 when Rosen made the fine for let's say $15,000, and you cashed it in for $1 million today, you probably are very happy. So,
yeah, right.
So you look at it in the long range view, we're doing fine.
Right. Totally. And I think there's money to be made in crisis. There's money to be made in when things are not going as well as maybe we hoped. That you can go on YouTube this week, and that was kind of one of the past couple weeks as one of the big sort of topics that we saw on a lot of channels was which this has literally been there. This goes in cycles. This is the one thing that as soon as prices go down a little bit, everyone freaks out. Everyone loses their minds. Everybody makes videos about how the hobby is dying or it's crashing. And I don't necessarily really think I think that was one of the things at the National that I think people were saying it, but I don't think the other way that people were actually saying that the hobby is dying. I think everybody was kind of trying to be like, yeah, we're doing fine. Like, it's not really that big of a deal. I do think, obviously seeing a mantle go down $1 million is it's pretty shocking. But at the same time, it's like you said, if you zoom out a little bit, in the 80s or 90s, you could have bought that card for what, 15,000. So I don't know. I mean,
in 1992, we priced it at Beckett in probably what would be PSA 6 condition at about $30,000.
Right.
I will take $30,000 to $1 million in 30 years any time, any day of the week.
Right.
The other thing I
mean,
want to say, I'm sorry, go ahead, Adam.
No, I was just going to say, even if you zoom out from 2018 to now, the cards that are like, I forget who, I think it was Run Good Life, I think is an account on Twitter that does it. That's a pretty good Twitter account. They were posting some charts that were from, I think it was 2019 to now, like a bunch of cards that really shot up in value and have came down pretty significantly. But if you look at that 2019 to now, they're still up 100%. Like they're still up. They're double the price they were. So yeah. I don't know. I mean, I get, maybe that is like a little bit of a copium there that I'm trying to justify, like, you know, whatever, the price is going down, but if you look at it big picture, they're still up. And, you know, maybe it's something like that. But at the same time, it's just like, I don't know. There's so many different ways to do the hobby. Like you really can do it a bunch of different ways. And that's one of the things that, I mean, I like about sports cards too. And we can kind of move on from this and we'll get back into the show a little bit. So Leaf, like I said, is one of the, I don't know. It's probably Topps, Panini, Upper Deck. And then there's probably a mixing and mashing of whatever companies you could probably say are next. I'd say Leaf is in that conversation, very similar to like how SGC sort of jumped into the conversation of like a top grading company. Leaf has sort of done some interesting things over the past couple of years. And this is, I think, one of the most interesting, I was pointing at the screen, pointing at the camera. This is one of the more interesting ones. So Brody, I know you're a big wrestling fan. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on this? What are your initial thoughts? Are you excited? What do you think?
This is electric, as a certain someone would say. This is awesome. He has not had autographed cards in, I think, 25 years. And it was from a movie. I don't even remember off the top of my head what it was called, from like 2005 or 2003. So I wasn't even live. I'm excited to try to rip some of this stuff and pull a Rock autograph. This is super awesome for the hobby. I'm excited to see what these go for. And I'm just excited. This is really cool. Definitely. I'm really intrigued at how they got The Rock to sign for them too. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, right, totally. Rich, are you into wrestling cards? Is this something
a little bit. A little bit. I'm more of an old school guy. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm more. You know, I wish they had cards in the '70s when I was really following wrestling, and Stan the Man Stasiak, and you see some of these guys in the legend sets, and Chief J Strongbow, and Gorilla Monsoon, and Bobo Brazil. And Bruno Sammartino. These were the wrestlers I grew up watching. I did not grow up when Antonio Rocco was the heavyweight champ, but that's a different. that's even before my time. But The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, whatever name you want to have, he's one of the biggest names in the world.
Definitely,
yeah.
And anytime you can get somebody, this would be probably one level below Oprah Winfrey signing some cards.
Mm.
And, you know, when you're getting celebrities of this level signing cards, it's a big thing, period, end of sentence. And whether this started when Brian Gray was still owning Leaf or whether this is a new development, kudos to Leaf for whatever it took to get him to sign cards.
Definitely. And I mean, the one of the moves that I think is interesting, too, that Leaf has actually done, they signed Paige Buchers to an exclusive autograph deal as well, like an NIL deal. She's like, she could be the first pick next year, depending on how her season goes this year. She was definitely the first pick before last year going into the WNBA. She did get injured, unfortunately, and a couple other names kind of have jumped into that conversation. You know, Caitlin Clark's, the couple players from LSU that have kind of jumped into that conversation. So Leaf signed Paige Buchers, which means Paige Buchers wasn't in that Topps Chrome Bowman set, which I thought was kind of interesting. I didn't know why. This is obviously the reason why. It's because she had the NIL deal with Leaf versus with Topps. So, you know, the other question, I'll kind of go around and I'll wonder, like, the one thing I thought was interesting is that it says Dwayne Johnson on the card, not The Rock. So, like, do we think that those are two, like, do we think that the intellectual properties, like, I'll ask you this, Brody, I mean, you may know this answer. So, like, do you think that they signed Dwayne Johnson and not The Rock, and that those are two different people, even though Dwayne Johnson, they did him with wrestling? Do you think that The Rock and Dwayne Johnson are two different things? So do you think we could see The Rock in a product as well, as which is different from Dwayne Johnson? Like, that's kind of something that I'm interested in. So Brody, what do you think? Like, how much do you know? But like, do you know about this? Like, what do you think basically overall? Do you think that's a possibility we could see that?
I mean, I'm not sure, but I think if it just stays as Dwayne Johnson, I think this is because they can use him as more of like the actor Dwayne Johnson too as well, and they could put autographs of him as there and like Pop Century and stuff because I think that's something they could do in the future. And some of the movies he's been in, like I'm just trying to figure some off the top of my head, like Fast and Furious. That's like really. There was a Disney one he was in. I don't really know too many movies that The Rock was in, but there are only the couple ones I know off the top of my head.
And then actually, I'm going to pull up some of the other potential autographs we're going to see, this is an insane. And I think too with wrestling, that's cool is like they don't really like, especially with Leaf and with companies that don't have maybe the licensing for WWE. They can really kind of do a lot with wrestling because like it's not like jerseys where they have to worry about the MLB logo. They have to worry about the team's logo. They have to worry about all these things. Like they can kind of create these cards, and these are cards that like they don't have to like really Photoshop that much stuff out. I mean, I feel like Vince McMahon has been very notorious for keeping people's intellectual properties. So, like, maybe that's why we're seeing some of these older pictures. Maybe that's why it's Dwayne Johnson and not The Rock potentially. But I'm not sure. So, like, Rich, from your perspective, like, for when it comes to like wrestling cards, like, do you think it's more of an autograph type of game, or do you think like the base card, maybe one of ones could kind of make their way? Because I feel like that's also something that's changed a lot in this era of cards, or like numbered cards and stuff.
If you noticed, the Steve Austin does not say Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yeah.
It just says Steve Austin.
Right.
So again, the intellectual property of the name they were known as in WWE or WWF or WCW or whatever it is not being used. Steve Austin is his name. Hulk Hogan, I believe, may be his legal name at this point. His real name is Terry Bollea, but you can't really call him Terry Bollea. Nobody would know. Nobody would know who that is.
Right.
So but Hulk Hogan's a famous enough name where I think that's one where the intellectual property issue is not. And there it is. We've got the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of, honestly, that's sort of what I figured. And even this one, it's like Sylvester Stallone is Rocky. That's kind of who you're shooting for. You're shooting for the Rocky collector, hopefully. Now, granted, it's Sylvester Stallone. They're not going to sign Rocky. That probably is owned by, I don't know, some like Universal or like Disney or some company too. That like it's the same thing. I think it's cool that they're able to get these people in there in a different way. Where granted, it's not. I don't know, licensing within wrestling, I don't really think that is much of a big deal. And I do like that a company is sort of trying to get around not having the licensing in the same way that like these other companies do. I think, with Hulk Hogan too, like I think it's cool. Like this is going to be an insane card. Like this has got to be a 1-of-1 probably, or there'll be a 1-of-1 version. But that's one thing that I think is interesting with wrestling cards. It's just that like, they can kind of, like I said, get around. They can get around the licensing in this way because they have intellectual properties as wrestlers, but then they also have their real names, which they can use, which essentially they're associating with both of them. I think another big name. Actually, you guys, Brody, do you have any final thoughts on this topic? We're going to move on to the Bronny James topic, but do you have any final kind of thoughts on this before we move on?
I'm just excited that The Rock's back to signing, and I would love to see what these dual and quads go for. It's going to be exciting to see.
Definitely. Rich, same question to you. Do you have any final thoughts before we move on to
I think this is a master stroke by Leaf.
Yeah.
This will really generate interest in their products. I think, they're obviously the big companies that have the major licenses. Leaf is definitely among, let's say, second tier companies. This definitely makes Leaf the number one of the second tier companies.
Yep. Yeah.
They're not. They don't have the major license, but they've learned how to work around all this stuff all these years. Right. And Brian Gray, when he owned Leaf, has always said, "I love not having a license in a lot of ways. It let us be more creative."
Right. Exactly.
Look, and Bo is probably right. Bo is a big wrestling fan, so I will concede to. But the point is, whoever owns the Rock name, wherever reason, Leaf chose just to call him Dwayne Johnson instead of the Rock, and maybe they have a separate agreement later. We don't know, to use the Rock at some other point. That again would be a wonderful thing to do.
And we actually have a phenomenal topic for a phenomenal transition here, because we actually are going to be talking about this card next. Let me pull up the McDonald's All American. The Bronny James McDonald's All American products finally came out. There were some rumors earlier on in the year when I guess the 2022 McDonald's All American product was coming out that Bronny James had signed an NIL deal, but then like he wasn't on the checklist, which I thought was kind of confusing. And I think, Rich, I'll ask you this question first, because I thought something that was kind of interesting about this product was that, is this one of the first times we've seen a 2022 and a 2023 same product come out within a year? Like, because the McDonald's All American 2022 product came out in probably like April or May, and then it's obviously it's November or October time period now. So like, do you find that strange that they're coming out with two of the same product with different years in the same year? Has that ever happened before? Have you seen
it has
like
happened
that?
before, and off the top of my head, I don't remember when. It has happened before where you do one and then you get the next. But remember, we are finally in the home stretch of catching up on how all products are being released on time. We were still in a backlog. We still have a few things that show up in a backlog, like 2022 Topps Chrome, Platinum, or whatever they call it. That really big set with all the parallels and autograph. It's a really nice set in the 53 design this year, but it's a 2022 set released in 2023. I suspect next year maybe we'll get the 2023 issued early in the year and 2024 issued around now, and we will finally start catching up on everything being issued in the year it's supposed to be issued.
Right.
Also, remember, in baseball, you basically have from Topps, and this has been going on for a while, until Topps ones come out, you can still issue the previous year stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say something like, and I'm just going to spitball here, Heritage Minors comes out in January 2024. Let's say next year it comes out, 2024 comes out November 2024. And you get everything done at the right time. You've issued two products the same year. You've spun the calendar a little bit. So it is very plausible to have a situation. You don't want to have them sort of piling on top of each other, but it can happen. And as I said, we're still catching up from the remnants of falling behind during the pandemic.
Right. Yeah. And so, Brody, I'll kick to you. What are your thoughts on the card, like the Bronny James card? Is it something that you're interested in? Do you think it's something that going to hold long-term value? Like, what are your thoughts on this card?
I mean, it's going to really depend on how he performs. But, I mean, Topps is doing everything they can to make Bronny James look like a star before he steps on that court at USC, because they know that he's LeBron James' son.
Right.
He's LeBron James' kid, and they want to make him look like a star so that you buy his cards. And if LeBron James' kid makes it to the NBA, it's going to be a really big deal, like how Victor Wembanyama has been a big deal.
Definitely.
Okay.
I mean, and the odds, obviously, he won't be as good as Wembanyama. However, like to me, for example, and I don't think it may have been done, it may not have been done. I think Topps had a missed opportunity 20 years ago when Patrick Ewing's kid played, not for a long time, but Patrick Ewing Jr. played in the NBA. Patrick Sr., Patrick Jr., Tim Hardaway Jr., Tim Hardaway Sr., Glenn Rice Jr., I think, has played in the NBA. I know Gary Payton's kid is playing either college or pro. I mean, there's a lot of sons of NBA players in the league. I mean, what an opportunity for autographs to get both the current and the dad to sign cards.
Totally. Yeah, definitely agree.
That would be, I'm sure it's been done. If it hasn't been done, it needs to be done just to get those people in.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll get that, except that Manute's not living anymore, so you can't get a dual signed card. You can get a photo of Manute, and but you can't get Manute to sign, sadly, anymore.
Yeah, and so I actually one thing when I was kind of covering this on Hobby News Daily, I'll shamelessly plug the podcast that I'm doing every day. But one of the things that I was talking about on that show was it feels like this product could change the time frame of like when cards are produced and then when they can be put into packs. Like, because we saw Bronny signing at the McDonald's All American game, which I know it happened over the summer. I don't remember exactly when it happened over the summer, but the fact that it happened, only like 4 or 5 months ago, and then the fact that we're seeing this product come out with the cards that he signed, like, so Rich, I'll ask you this question: the time frame of how long it takes to produce a product, like, do you think that do you think that they need to figure out a way to make it faster? Or because like I feel like this one, that's what they did. They came out with those cards and then they came out with it rather than coming out with it next year, which is what they did I think with the 2022 version. They signed the cards in 2022, and then they came out with 2022 and 2023, and then this one they're coming out with it in November, end of October. Do you think that's do you think that this is going to change the way that these products are produced, or like I don't know. That's kind of my question. It's like from
this
your
is
perspective over the years.
Okay, this is a smaller size product.
Right.
I don't necessarily mean smaller in terms of how many cards they produced. I'm about number of people in the set. Mm-hmm. You have a finite number of people who play in the All American game. You have a finite people if there's skills contests, and I believe there's dunk contests and all that. Mm-hmm. You have a finite people. So you can probably prep the set in a lot of ways in advance and just get, but you have to get the photographs. You have to get the signatures. You have to get all the things. So it's a little hard. You also want to get it in to people, to collectors' hands when there's a chance. There's a difference. Topps One, 2024 Topps One, they probably began planning in March of this year. Mm. And, they try to pay attention who's going to be a free agent, who will be with the team next year, who has rookie cards. I bet you at this point, people like Jordan Lawler and Evan Carter will be rookie cards in 2024 Topps One. I think Ellie De La Cruz too. I think I'm not sure if he was an update or not, but, anybody who made a debut this year, but I'll use Carter and Lawler because they came up late and they both played in the World Series.
Right.
They'll be in 2024 Series 1. So you save room for people like that.
Yeah,
you get the bulk of your set and everything. You get the bulk of everything prepped in advance, and then you make some tweaks to the checklist. Here, you do the global thing of, okay, I want to have, let's say, a 50-card set or a 40-card set. Okay, we're going to have autographs, so we have to get the players to sign. They're in a certain place. And then, if we make parallels, that's fine. So in this sense, you want to do the prep work for what you want to put in the set. Mm. And then you know who the players are. And then you also have to make sure that everybody that you get in the set, especially now with the NIL stuff going on, you want to make sure that everybody that you get can actually appear on a card.
Right. That makes sense.
Going back to the early 90s, Alex Rodriguez took several years to show up on a Topps card because he was on the 93 Topps USA team, and they wanted to put him in Topps Traded in 93. Mm-hmm. And he just was able to say, no, I've not signed. And that's why it took to 97, I believe, to get Alex Rodriguez on a Topps card, where he's got 94 cards with other companies. So you have to always remember the licensing issues too, but you can create the shell for the set, what you want to put in. And then you just plug, in a sense, the players and the cards, and which is different than doing a bigger set where you have a pretty good idea already who the players are. You don't have to wait till the last minute for the players, but you then have to, create all the shells, see if anybody gets traded by X date, see if you have to change anything.
Right, definitely. And yeah, so I'll kick it to Brody for one last thing before we move on to the last topic for today's show. So we have seen McDonald's All American cards. We saw, I think, Kevin Durant had one, but it's not really something that, like, I don't know. It's with sports cards. It feels like there's just these unwritten rules for whatever reason. Like, for sometimes people care if it's the first card. Sometimes they don't care if it's the player's first card. Like, so Brody, I'll ask you this question: do you think that the McDonald's All American set could ever be a top card that people want to get versus like the first rookie card, because like I said, it is Bronny James's first Topps card. So like, do you think that's going to matter, or do you think it really honestly comes down to the type of uniform and the type of product that ends up being released for people to actually want that card kind of long term? Obviously, the player has to work out, but kind of just the Topps All American card in general, I suppose.
I don't think so, because especially now with the NIL deals where they can make these Bowman first Bowmans, like that's going to be one of the cards you want. The first Bowmans are big in baseball. We know that. And when they have their NBA jersey cards and Fanatics gets it back and they use Topps Chrome cards, the base Topps Chrome NBA uniforms are going to be big. And we know about the first Bowmans already. Those are huge too.
Right.
I want to respond to a couple comments. I honestly have no idea if Bronny James is any good or not at USC, but from a marketing standpoint, Topps is going to tell you that Bronny is the next guy because he's LeBron James' kid, and they're going to push him and push him and push him in any sets he's in.
Totally. And I actually think that's a phenomenal point. And I think when it comes to, I think with sports cards too, it's one of the types of things where it's like, if you can get influenced, you're going to be influenced. Like, and that's sort of the thing. Like, at this point, it's hard for me to empathize with people who are influenced by marketing. In my opinion, it's just like we've seen this style of marketing has been around for the whole time of the internet. So like, at this point, if you are influenced by someone saying that you should buy this thing, then, I do have a little bit of a hard time empathizing. That could also be like an age thing, if I'm going to be honest, because I grew up on the internet. I've worked in marketing, like I've worked in internet marketing. So it's like, I can recognize when a company is marketing something. Like, it's the type of thing. It's like there's the thing that's like hashtag ad on the TikToks or on YouTube or on Twitter. But it's like, even if something isn't an ad, it's an ad. Like if there's any type of product placement in a video or anything, it's just an ad. Like that person potentially is getting paid for that thing. So, if like you said, I think Topps is going to try and sell Bronny James as the next Victor Wembanyama, so that way they can sell products. And that's just, unfortunately for us as sports card consumers, that's just the way that it has to be marketed. It's hard to really market. Like Topps can't come out and be like what we're saying, where we're saying that, Bronny James, he may or may not be good. Like Topps obviously isn't going to come out and say something like that because they want you to buy the products that he's in. And that's just kind of what ends up happening with some of these young players within products. And like I said, speaking of young players, we're going to kick it over to our last topic here. And this week we had the release of this year's Prism design. It's very similar to the past couple of years. I think I'm okay with it being similar. I think from a design standpoint, I think they have changed it enough, in my opinion, where, it's not just the same design over and over again. It's the same style for sure, but it's not necessarily something where I'm sitting here being like, I wouldn't buy this product because of the design. So, Brody, for you, like, have you had a chance to get excited for this year's Prism? Like, what do you think of the design? Are you excited for this year's rounds of rookies? Like, what do you kind of think of what are your initial thoughts on this year's Prism?
I kind of like it. I mean, like you said, it's not like groundbreaking. I'm not like going crazy for it, but it kind of looks like a little bit like 2015, 2014, a little bit old schooler, like not as much action in the background. So I kind of like it. The font's a little small, which I don't always dig, but it's decent. I like it. A little bit of change from last year, nothing crazy, but it's cool. I like it.
Rich, I'll kick it to you here. Like, you have seen hundreds of different designs for cards, throughout your career within sports cards. Like, is the design of a card something that draws you to a card, or is it kind of just like a secondary thing depending on the product?
It's kind of important and kind of secondary depending on the product. And I'm going to go way old school on this. 57 Topps, the first year of the top standard size cards, is an absolutely beautiful set. I love the set. It's the clear photo, the names, everything. 58 to me, and even 59, because the photos are so cool, are major steps back. Yet people still collect those sets. In a set like Prism, where Prism is basically Panini's base set. That's their flagship set. You want, Prism has a certain look, so you want to kind of maintain the look of the set, but make the subtle changes each year. So that's something that this is a nice, attractive card. I mean, I like it, and obviously the Prisms will, they'll shine. So I mean, I like that gold Prism.
Yeah,
that's a nice looking card. It shows off very well.
Definitely.
So as long as the card is, and the audience will always tell you if a set is not attractive, you may still sell some, but then it won't really go very far unless there's something really special about it, meaning a player selection or a short print or something. So it's a secondary but important issue. In other words, the fans won't be robbed again if it's a set like this. They're not, as Casey Stengel used to say about the Mets, the fans got robbed when they were really bad. Nobody's going to get robbed on this. This is a nice looking set.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you made a good point there, and one that I actually was going to transition to here with like the concept of like a base set. Topps obviously has like Topps flagship. They've got Series 1, Series 2, Series 3. Upper Deck has their like flagship product that has the Young Guns coming out. Shout out to Brody. You got Connor Bedard coming in Series 2, which is exciting. But so Panini doesn't really have they don't really have like a flagship set. So Rich, I guess I'll ask you this question. I think you may have just answered it. Do you think that Prism is like Panini's basically like their flagship product? Like, would you consider Prism their
flagship product? I think at one point Score was really the flagship product, but now Prism is the flagship product. You see it in retail. You'll get the blaster boxes in retail. The collectors love Prisms. Some actually love the fact that they try to chase the rainbows of God knows how many parallel sets. I think one year they have 46 or something.
Right. Yeah.
So there's a lot in Prism. You can collect the base set. You can collect inserts. You can collect sign cards. You can collect parallels. You can collect what you want.
They've got I think they have memorabilia cards in there. Whether those are
memorabilia cards,
whether those are Dick's Sporting Goods memorabilia or not, we'll never know.
There's a lot of things in Prism that are and there's a lot of things in a lot of the card sets. Don't get me wrong, but Prism is basically at this point the flagship set for Panini.
Yeah,
and it is. I mean, what's the card everybody knows of Luka? It's the Prism rookie card.
Prism, right?
He's got a lot of other rookie cards that year. Some are much more expensive, but the one everybody knows is the Prism card.
Yeah,
and to me, that's a great example.
Yeah, I agree, and I'll actually. So Brody, I'll kick to you with this last question before we kind of wrap up the show here. Is Prism for you the set that you think is the flagship set? Because I feel like there's Optic, there's Donruss, there's Prism obviously. So like, would you consider Prism as basically Panini's flagship set?
Yeah, I'd agree, especially because, like you said, that's the rookie card that people remember, and I think that's what makes a flagship set. And that's what I think. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Uncle Rich has seen thousands and thousands of designs.
I have.
Yeah,
I have seen thousands and thousands of designs. And when I go through value boxes, I see all the thousands and thousands of we talk about value boxes. We use the term dollar boxes for value boxes, but I really use the term, it's sort of intermingled. But when you go through a value box, you see a lot of designs. You see a lot of stuff.
Right.
And bless the people who do it, because they have to design the sets. And a lot of, Upper Deck hired, I always forget their name, but the people who did the Metal Universe cards in the 90s are now designing cards for Upper Deck.
Right.
They've hired some really top-notch designers.
Definitely.
Upper Deck, they found them. I think somebody helped them, and they got them sort of out of retirement of doing cards to, hey, you're going to do cards again. And I'm sure for them, it's like extra money. They're all thrilled about that.
Right.
Totally. So it's a good thing. And I want to give you a shout out, Adam. Most Saturdays, as I talk, when I do try to listen to your catch up each week. I don't listen on a daily basis, but I do listen most Saturdays, to your, I find it's a very good way to get a recap of the week.
Absolutely. I mean,
Brody, what have you got coming up? When's your next life?
I just watching sports today. We got college football and
Nice.
we got WWE pay-per-view, Crown Jewel. So
Nice.
I'm excited to just sit back and watch some sports today.
Love that. And yeah, so I mean, pretty much that's all the topics that we have actually for today. We're running up right at the top of the hour. So, first, Brody, do you have any closing words, any messages you want to give the audience before we wrap things up today?
Oh, I just have a good weekend and enjoy whatever you're watching. There's a lot to watch, so enjoy it. Have a good day.
Absolutely. And then, Rich, same question to you.
I've enjoyed being
words of wisdom?
I've enjoyed being the closer today. By Lee Arthur, since Victor is a Cubs fan, my Bruce Sue or Lee Arthur Smith imitation worked very well today.
Love
Victor
that.
was very good. I loved, I could hear him talking about the gem rate stats, and he had done a really deep dive into the numbers, which was great to hear. I could hear him, without saying, and it was great to hear. And it's fun. And next week we'll have more topics. I'll be back next week for the full hour instead of a half hour, which some of you may say it's great. Another you may say that's an hour and a half too much of Rich.
Yeah. So I think I usually say this on most episodes. There's always new people coming into the hobby. So us as creators of content, if people have questions, make sure to answer these questions. Like at one point, or just anybody in general, someone asks you a question about sports cards, just answer it with grace, because at one point you probably were asking similar questions. So just remember that there's always new people coming in every single day. And if you can help them make their hobby experience better, that's always a plus for me. So thank you all for listening. I don't think we have an episode on. No, we might have an episode on Tuesday, I think, coming up, because it's the first Tuesday of the month.
The first Tuesday of the month. We will have a Tuesday night show.
So there will be a Tuesday night show on the Hobby Hotline YouTube channel. And then next week, we'll be back here on the Bench Clear Media YouTube channel with our normal Saturday show. So thank you all for listening. Thank you all on YouTube for leaving comments and liking and sharing. Thank you all, and we'll see you in the next one.